Good morning. My name is Liz Sherman. I'm class of 1977 and proud parent of class of '06 and '09. And as chair of the Pembroke Center Associates Council, I'd like to welcome you to the Pembroke Center's Commencement Forum, award-winning theater, Brown Playwrights, and their work. Today's forum is sponsored by the Pembroke Center Associates, a group of alumni and friends who support Brown's Pembroke Center for Teaching and Research on Women, which will be celebrating its 30th anniversary in the fall. Although it was established to explore the cultural and social meanings of gender and difference, today's Pembroke Center supports research and teaching across the humanities, social sciences, biological sciences, and creative arts. The Pembroke Center's interdisciplinary research programs draw scholars from around the world to explore risks and benefits of social change. We bring together faculty, postdoctoral fellows, and students to research the ways questions of difference, such as race, sexuality, religion, and class, affect our thinking and our world. Beginning next year, the Pembroke Center will be offering competitive seed grants to launch new research across projects across the humanities, social sciences, and creative arts. As part of this work, we will be exploring literary and artistic representations of difference and how difference operates in texts, media, and the arts. So we're particularly pleased to present today's forum featuring two of Brown's amazing playwrights who so powerfully explore in artistic form the issues that the Pembroke Center is researching in scholarly form. I hope you've had a chance to look through our brochure and newsletters. I encourage you to visit our website for more information about our programs, activities, and research. If you would like to become more involved, I urge you to join me as a Pembroke Center Associates member. Before we get started with the program, please just take a minute and turn off your cell phones so that we don't interrupt our distinguished guests while they're speaking. Thanks. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's panelist and moderator. Adam Bock earned his master's in creative writing from Brown in 1989. His play, A Small Fire, premiered at Playwrights Horizons in New York in 2011 and was nominated for 4 Drama Desk Awards, including Best Play. His musical, We Have Always Lived in the Castle, premiered in 2010 at the Yale Repertory Theater. Mr. Bock's other plays include The Receptionist, The Drunken City, The Flowers, The Thugs, Swimming in the Shallows, 5 Flights, The Topographer's Dream, The Shaker Chair, and 3 Guys and a Brenda. He has won the Obie, the Clauder Competition Award, the Heidemann Award, the Glickman Award, the Bay Area Critical Circle Award, and has been nominated twice for the Outer Critics Circle Award. Mr. Bock is a resident playwright in San Francisco's Encore Theater and a Shotgun Players Artistic Associate. He is a New Dramatist member playwright and a New York Theater Workshop usual suspect. He is also proud to be a Theater Development Fund Open Doors mentor at Validus High School in Bronx. Lynn Nottage, Brown University class of 1986, earned her MFA from Yale University of Drama, where she is currently a visiting lecturer. Her Pulitzer Prize-winning play, Ruined, has also received an Obie, the Lucille Lauder Award, New York Drama Critics Circle Award, Drama Desk Award, and Outer Critics Circle Award for Best Play. Her new play, By the Way, Meet Vera Stark, premiered in New York earlier this month. Ms. Nottage's other plays include Intimate Apparel, Fabulation, or The Re-Education of Undine, Crumbs from the Table of Joys, La Maninas, Mud River, Stone, Pork Knockers, and Poof. Ms. Nottage is the recipient of the 2010 Steinberg Distinguished Playwrights Award and the Dramatists Guildhall Warner Award, the inaugural Horton Foote Prize for Outstanding New American Play, the Lee Reynolds Award, and the Jewish World Watch Eyewitness Award. Her other honors include the 2007 MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant, the National Black Theater Festival's August Wilson Playwriting Award, the 2005 Guggenheim Grant for Playwriting, the 2004 Penn Laura Pels Award for Drama, and fellowships from the Lucille Lortel Foundation, Manhattan Theater Club, New Dramatists, and New York Foundation for the Arts. She is also a member of the Dramatists Guild and alumna of New Dramatists. And tomorrow she will receive an honorary degree from Brown. And in the center, our moderator today is Engbang Lim, Assistant Professor of Theater Arts and Performance Studies here at Brown. He is Director of Undergraduate Studies in Performance Studies and an affiliate faculty member with the Department of American Civilization and the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. He also serves on the Gender and Sexuality Studies Faculty Board. He specializes in theater, drama, and performance studies with a focus on transnational, Asian, and queer issues. Professor Lim's teaching and research areas include critical and performance theory, queer and racist performance, performance in the Asias, and the role of the arts in the global university. He has lectured widely at the universities in the US, the UK, and Asia, and his writing has appeared in Theater Journal, Asian Theater Journal, Modern Drama, Theater Survey, and Social Text, where he is a member of its editorial collective. So let's start our program and turn it over to Professor Lim.
Thanks, Liz, and a warm shout out to the Pembroke Center Associates for making this Pembroke Commencement Forum possible. What a joyous and momentous occasion to have Lynn Nottage and Adam Bock with us. It's so rare to have a public conversation with a playwright, let alone two, who between the two of them have practically won all the awards out there, except the Nobel Prize, which I'm sure is forthcoming. I am so humbled and honored to serve as moderator this morning to two prolific and powerful writers with a very deeply moving sense of social conscience, and they do it with such style and wit. This morning we'll get a chance to know a little bit of their work, their craft, technique, the way they think, their background, just a sense of who they are. So we're going to have a free-flowing conversation for the first part of this forum. I've given Lynn and Adam a couple of options as I variously transmogrify into an Asian James Lipton doing a playwright's version of The Actors Studio. I might come out as daytime Oprah at some point, and I might also bring out my inner Anderson Cooper, a little bit of investigative journalism. So I'm not quite sure what we decided, but it will be a mixture of all three different genres. But I think I have a sense that, during this time that we shared this morning, we're going to cover on strong women. We're going to be talking about gay men, women in the African diaspora, theatrical representations of race and sexuality, intercultural performance politics, and the way that the playwrights deal with American open-mindedness on the one hand and parochialism on the other, among many other topics. So I think that we'll get to where we get to, depending on how things go. But I think if it fits, yeah, it's a lot, but we'll get there.
I forget how smart Brown is. Oh my God. I didn't get in undergraduate. I didn't. So it's like, I came and I would go to classes here, and I was like, oh boy.
We're here to celebrate your work. We're here to celebrate the work of both Lynn and Adam, and also the collective achievements of our graduating students here at Brown. So I think it befits the occasion to begin by asking a question about Brown's influence on you And to situate Brown in your trajectory of formations as a writer, we're presuming that Brown has done something to you that's kind of good. And so we would like for you to perhaps think through the lens of Brown as a venue, as a memory, as an intellectual space, and for you to perhaps think about particular professors, classes, concepts, secret societies, writing clusters, things that you have been involved in here at Brown that were constitutive. What were some of these encounters and memories? What did Brown do to you?
Well, if I may begin. I came to Brown University with a very specific agenda, which was defined by my parents and Brown University, and that was to be a doctor. I had gotten a scholarship from Pembroke class of 1923, which supported me through much of my years here. Then 3 things happened while I was on this campus. The first thing that happened is I encountered an extraordinary spirit in the form of a professor named George Bass, who was my very first playwriting. My very first playwriting professor, and while I was taking chemistry and biology and calculus, I always found refuge in one other course, which was a literary course, and for me it was playwriting. And after a period of time, I found that it was the only class that I was looking forward to going, and I still had to take care of all those other classes. Then a second thing happened to me, which I encountered another professor who was here for doing her first year, named Paula Vogel. And she was the first person who I met who was a professional playwright, because George Bass, as wonderful as he was a spirit of the university. He was very much sort of entrenched in academia, but hadn't sort of explored the greater world. But Paula Vogel let me know that playwriting wasn't just a hobby and something that could end when I left the university. And then the third and most important thing that happened to me is I was in organic chemistry. And I've told this story before, but this is probably one of the most seminal experiences at Brown. And I was in one of those big lecture halls, and anyone here might be able to refresh my memory, I can't remember. And there's about 350 people in the class. And so it's immense. And I remember taking the midterm, and the professor wrote on the blackboard a bell curve. This huge bell curve showing, who had the lowest score and who had the highest score. And I turned to my friend Nancy and I said, oh my God, I can't imagine who got that 32. That was the big 32, that was the lowest. I was sure that I got the 99 on the other side, because I figured I just completely rocked it. And in this particular class, you had to walk down the steps to collect your exam. And you'd open it, and you'd look at it, and then you'd close it, and you'd walk back up the steps very stoically. And so I was in, so A, B, C, D. They finally got to Nottage. They called me down, and I walked down those steps. I opened my test, and I saw 32. And I thought, oh my God. I closed it, sort of stood erect, and I walked back up the steps, and my friend Nancy turned to me. She's like, you so rock that. So confident. And for me, that was the transformative moment, and I knew that I was not going to be a doctor, I was going to be a theater artist. Those are my 3, but much more certainly happened to me at Brown. I feel really blessed, particularly at the time when I first was introduced to this university. They had the open curriculum, which allowed me to explore in ways that I don't think I would have done in other universities. I imagine that if I had been trapped in medical school, I wouldn't have discovered playwriting, and I wouldn't have permitted myself to sort of explore in that way. So I'm very thankful to this curriculum.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a good jumping off point, because I was up in Canada living in my parents' basement, only coming up during the night. When a friend of mine said, there's a great teacher down at Brown. There's a woman named Paula Vogel. She was starting to take with Paula. And so I moved to Providence in October, the year before I started going.
and actually was a waiter on down on Thayer Street, and the curriculum was so open that people would let me just come and take classes. I didn't actually go to Brown. I went in and I would say to the teachers were amazing. I'd say, oh, I'd really love to sit in, and I actually sat in on some seminars. And I took like 4 classes my first year. And I sat in on Paula's workshop and would act for all of her playwrights. And then I applied and she let me in, which I gave her a big 200-page piece of mess, you know, but she let me in. And I tell people it was a 2-year program, a master's program. She's an amazing teacher. She's at Yale now. But she's amazing, and I've heard great things about Eric, and I think is here too. So you guys I think you've done a good job replacing her. But I remember I did, I think in 2 years, I think I did 42 projects. We worked really hard. We just worked and worked and worked. I did 3 major plays. I produced, I acted, I directed, I wrote, I did everything. And so Brown just kept me, and I actually edited one of the The Differences Journal, which I think is the journal from Pembroke. Yeah, I edited one of those. So that was what was sort of amazing. Similar to New York, if you were interested, you could do anything, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, people are always very curious about the leap from the halls of the academy to the world out there.
Yeah.
And that's where you are right now. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about this bifurcation between the so-called cloistered halls of the academy and the big bad world out there, and to think about this narrative and plot it out in terms of your personal history, and to think about how out here being Brown and out there being something called the industry, whether it is Broadway, off-Broadway, the independent theater, Lower Manhattan, and regional theater, and the borders found therein. What did you consider your break? How did you get your first work produced?
Well, let me just say one thing quickly first.
Yeah.
If Lynn and I were doctors, and we'd achieved what we'd achieved at level of our profession, we'd be so rich. It's so unfair, right?
Say, pity our patients.
I know, pity our patients, but we'd be so... I have a great friend who's a writer, and she says, as a writer, you get invited to so many very fancy parties, but you take the bus, right? So, it's a really interesting move. I always talk to writing students. It's hard going to one of these Ivies because when you go to an Ivy, you assume you're going to jump to that level immediately when you get out into the world, and then suddenly, as writers, you don't. It's not the same thing. It's not doing work here because you go to an Ivy League school, or doesn't mean necessarily that people are going to be, one, interested in your writing. It may actually be a detriment in a certain extent because you're actually trying to connect to a wider audience. And the way, just even when you were introducing and talking that language, I was like, what the hell is he saying? You know, and so you get it. You know, and you guys were like, but half of you were lying. And if you had to listen to a lot of it in the play, you would have been like, I'm going to watch TV. You know? So, I don't know.
For me, it's the journey was really interesting because I went from Brown to Yale. And when I graduated from Yale, I was 24 years old. And I just assumed that I was going to move back home. And I traveled back to New York, and my mother's like, you're not coming home. I mean, literally, she's like, you have to find an apartment. I'm like, but I have all my stuff. Where am I going to go? She's like, we're finished. This is it. And so I found myself suddenly in the middle of New York City having to make a living and realizing that playwriting was not going to be sustainable, that I had all these fancy degrees that weren't going to feed me. And in my case, I was also very interested in not having an academic life and and interfacing with the world in a way that I hadn't here and at Yale. And I began working at an organization called Amnesty International, which I did for 4 years. I was their national press officer, which was a very big job. I remember the first day that I arrived, I thought, do they know I'm a playwriting student? Yet they gave me this very big job in which I grew in ways that I can't even sort of express, and I grew exponentially every single day, but I still really, really longed to be a creative spirit. And you asked, what is that moment? For me, my moment of sort of transition, and in which I felt like I wanted to be a playwright again, came when I saw some astonishing pictures of women who had just entered a homeless shelter for battered women. And the photographer like snapped a picture of them the moment they came. And I looked through maybe 25 of these pictures, and the tears flowed, and I turned to my executive director and said, is there anything that we can do for these women at Amnesty International? And he said, it's not within our mandate. And I thought, it's not within their mandate. This is a human rights organization. I thought, but I have to do something. And so I closed my office door, and I did what came naturally. I wrote a play. And that play was called Poof, which ended up being a 10-minute short play, which is done internationally. And it's about a woman who's abused. She has an argument with her husband. He yells at her. She goes, damn you to hell, and he spontaneously combusts and becomes a pile of ash. And she looks at this ash, and she's like, what am I going to do? She calls her best friend, and they discuss for about 10 minutes what to do, and they finally decide to sweep him under the rug. And I tell you, it's interesting, and this is such a side tangent, but I went to see Bengal Tiger. Has anyone seen Bengal Tiger? Which is a wonderful play about Iraq. And there's an Iranian actor who was in it. I went backstage to congratulate him. He's like, I just have to tell you, I was in Iran last year, and I saw Poof. And he's like, you don't know what a wave that play made there. It was the biggest star played it. In Iran, and I couldn't figure out why suddenly I'd gotten all of these Facebook hits from Iran.
Iran, you're like...
But that play, I ended up submitting to the Actors Theater of Louisville, and they decided to do it in their 10-minute play, and it really was my reintroduction into theater.
I did a play after Brown and in New York in a little theater and had a horrible experience. I didn't like the producer, and so I quit. And I was living in Providence and working at Trinity Rep as the bottom of the bottom there. And they were doing the Christmas Carol, and I was like, there are no gay people in this stupid play. It made me really mad. It made me really mad. This was in 1990. And so what I did was it was 2 weeks before Christmas, I took the music of the Nutcracker, and I did seven little skits to the music. So a little dyke ballet, and a little, I'm gonna marry her instead of him, and the Sugar Plum Fairy couldn't stop thinking about the music, and a big drag queen. And we threw it up in a friend's dance studio, and it was all amateurs. It was $3. They had to bring their own chairs. And 250 people came to that. So I did it the next year at Brown's, one of the big halls at Brown. Peter Hawking lent me the room. And again, all amateurs, $4. And 400 people came, and then we did again 600 people. Then last year 800 people came, and it was the second biggest thing other than Gay Pride. And the final year, I did another dyke ballet. There were 20 lesbians on stage in tutus because I had gathered them. None of them had been on stage before, certainly not as lesbians. And I gathered them for their one rehearsal, and I said, you're gonna wear blue jeans and work boots and then tutus. They're like, tutus? How are we gonna get tutus? And they're like, oh, I guess we'll have a craft party. I was like, gay guy could make a tutu out of this, we do that. And they said, you have to get basketballs. I need basketballs and power tools, and they're all like, we can do that, we got that. But I watched them as these little women were lifting big women, and I'd gotten a real choreographer, and I was like, oh, theater is about providing for my community something that it doesn't have. At Christmas, gay people back then, it was like the worst time of year, because you didn't want to go home, there was no representation, and instead there were all these people watching these women and men from my community running around in elf outfits and, and I remembered, oh, okay, this is why I'm supposed to do this work. I have to figure that out.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. So this provision for community, whether it is gay men or women, points to the ways in which playwriting for you isn't just about making it in the industry, but that it is also a kind of social practice, that it is a kind of a set of commitments that you have to a set of politics, a set of ideas that you're committed to. I wonder if you could talk about, the responsibility that you think a playwright has, and how you negotiate with mainstream America vis-a-vis the kinds of, projects that you have.
Oh, sure. For me, I consider myself to be first and foremost a storyteller, and I guess fortunately and unfortunately, the stories that I want to tell are about African American women, and so I think by virtue of telling these stories, it becomes a political act. And I'm always surprised when people come and see my plays and say, "Oh, I didn't know this was happening," or "I've never seen this on stage before." Because so much of what I write about are things that happen in my own life. And what they're communicating to me is that my life is unfamiliar to them.
Right.
And so I feel like it's, and I wouldn't say responsibility, but it's part of my journey is to tell the stories of women from African diaspora and sort of sprinkle them out there. You talk about like the sugar plum theory.
Right.
I feel like I'm just delivering these stories to far corners of the world.
It feels like, there's an official story of the world. We all know it, and we know who's supposed to be in the center of it, and we know who's supposed to be in it, and we know the roles they're supposed to play. And I think both Lynn and I poke at that story. I don't believe that story. And I think that actually the only way the world changes is if the story of the world changes. And so what I try to do is, oh, you forgot to tell this part of that story. This person doesn't even exist. It always drives me crazy because I'm watching a movie and there are like 10 men starring and one woman. I'm like, where are the other women? And doesn't it drive women crazy? I mean, but what's going on? I mean, like, we're still watching that story. I'm like, what the, or like, where are the the gay people, we're over there like this, and there's shiny things around us, and we're going like that, I know what I'm supposed to do. And that's a little bit true, but, but it's also, it doesn't feel like a whole world to me, so that feels really important to me. I don't know. I mean, the other truth of it is I read this book and it says, everybody is defined by certain desires, and I was reading mine, and one of mine is for status, and I was so embarrassed. Like, I like winning prizes, I like being noticed, so I'm not all of that, I'm not only doing it for the society, it's embarrassing. Tell the truth, but it also feels important to do the other part, It's like half and half, so it's hard. It feels like you have to have some stat, How do you get your voice out,
Oh, but I always describe playwriting as a battle of attrition, is that you just keep chipping away and you keep doing it, because early on you really are not going to be rewarded. You're not going to be rewarded financially. You're not going to get rewards. You're not going to get produced. But there's something in us that drives us to do it. And my husband's heard me say this before, is that as playwrights we sort of oscillate between grandiosity, which drives us, and despair, which sort of fuels the writing.
Right.
And so it's that balance that permits us to be artists, and what is really a very crazy profession. I just finished doing a new play, by the way, Meet Veristar, and for those who sort of come, if you haven't seen it, we run until June 12th. But after I got it up and we had our opening night, I thought, oh my God, I have to begin this again. That I have to go back to this blank page and I have to find new stories to tell. And it's a really difficult, fraught journey because you don't know when you finish this play that you've poured your heart and soul into, whether anyone's going to produce it.
Well, the other
And
thing
yet you
I
have
always,
to-
aren't you always surprised that I have the gall to talk for 2 hours every year? Like, I'm like, oh yeah, you want to hear my next one, obviously. You know, I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, it makes me a little anxious, but there's something in me that really, it's fun. That's the other part, it's just fun. We get to, I love living in New York. I've loved everywhere I've lived, but New York, they have these incredible actors. The people that we get to work with are astonishing, you know, so.
So, but writing is hard. So
Yes, it is.
let's talk about the labor of writing. It's time consuming. There's a lot of labor and time involved in the writing, and I think that a lot of people are very interested in the process of your writing, what goes into it. I know that for both of you, research, ethnography, social documentation, dramatic enactments, transformative writing, all of that.
It's all that.
All that.
It's
It's all that. So, but tell us a little bit about the process.
Which one? The ethnography? No, just joking.
I mean, for me, a breakthrough moment was realizing that everything I do is part of my playwriting process. And so I forgive myself when I'm watching television, I'm writing plays, you know, when I'm walking down the street, it's all fueling me because otherwise you'll drive yourself insane because the process of sitting down at the typewriter is incredibly lonely. And I don't know about you, but I don't write every single day.
No.
And I'm a huge procrastinator.
Yes.
And I'm a binge writer.
Yes.
And I don't say this to my students because I want them to be incredibly disciplined, but I just find that I need to be engaged with the world in order to be inspired. I need to have conversations in order to make conversations. And so if I spend 9 hours a day writing, I find that my writing begins to cannibalize itself. And I get to the end and it all sounds the same. And so I try and sort of write in bursts and then live in bursts. And then write in bursts and then live in bursts.
Now I get embarrassed because I feel like I write very little, actually. And yet other writers say, oh, you write a lot. But
You too, you're very prolific.
Yeah, but I don't write very much. The thing that's I think is tough is actually what I'm always looking for is the moment when I write and I don't make. This is hard to describe. The first time it comes out is often the right moment. You're actually waiting for the moment to write the moment because if you hit it too much and edit it, it's not. I don't think it's the same as academic writing because the more you work at it, the more you manipulate it, it becomes muddier and you pull away the good stuff. The great moments that I've gotten lucky to write, I've written and then I've been like, what is that thing? And then I just back away and I don't touch it. You know, so often I've had to get courage from other people and say, I just wrote this thing, and they're like, leave it alone, just leave it alone, that's the good spot. You know, because I'm allowed. Did I short circuit?
I don't know.
Haha.
Do you want to use mine?
No, just turn this on again, see if it's
Yeah,
back
we turn
there.
it off.
I must have, I was so hot, it's just dying. You talk.
I'll talk.
Low battery.
A lot of people are always looking for an algorithm for writing, that they go to these classes in search of some sort of secret formula that's going to deliver the play, but I really feel like it doesn't exist, and each playwright has such a deeply personal process that sometimes can't even be articulated. And for me, for instance, you talk about this, and I describe it as, that when I write a play and when I'm writing 5, in which I feel as though it's taken my breath away or does something very emotional to me, I think I have something there. And it's not tangible. And I don't know how those moments connect, but somehow that is my structure and my process. But each play really, I don't know whether this is true for you, Adam, but each play really delivers itself in a different way. It's like Ruin, when you're talking about research, Ruin was a play, and I knew specifically that I wanted to write about gender-specific human rights abuse women in war. And I spent 3 years researching and hunting down this particular story, and it's a journey that took me to Africa 3 times, to all over East Africa. I went, Eric Ain's not here anymore, but I went with Eric Ain to Rwanda, where we traveled around the country interviewing people, trying to figure out how do you use art as a tool for healing. And then I got home after 3 years of research, and I sat down, and the play really wrote itself very, very quickly. But I've had other work where it feels as though I have to pull teeth to get to make it happen, and that those ahs aren't connecting. I just have one ah, and I can't get any more. I can't inflate it.
I wanted to also ask you, before we open up to the floor for Q&A, what you're currently working on? And I know that you've mentioned a play that you have just finished writing. Perhaps you want to tell us a little bit about the kinds of projects that we might be, looking out for.
I'm in a pause moment.
Nice.
Yes, I just finished the play. I just finished the production 2 weeks ago, and I've been working on the screenplay for Ruin, but I find myself in a really strange position of having a completely blank slate. I know that I'm very interested in writing about poverty, and I have this big scheme, which is to rent an RV, and I'm calling it my 6-pack project, where we drive around the country, set a 6-pack outside of our RV and some chairs, and say to people, have a beer, let's talk.
Nice.
And just collect the stories, but I don't know whether it's pie in the sky, but I just want to know what's really happening in the midst of this crisis we're going on, sort of emotionally and philosophically, because I feel as though we're sort of force-fed stories by the media to sort of fit a very specific agenda, but I don't know what's really happening in the belly of this beast that we call America.
I have a play that I'll do in August out in Berkeley, a version of Phaedra. It's my first time sort of doing a Greek adaptation, so we'll see how that goes. It's so strange because you write and you have no idea whether it works. I write it and I'm like, oh, and each time brand new. I hope it means something. I have another idea. I want to write, there are 5 actresses in New York that I love, and I just want to make them all sisters. So that's all I know. I know. I thought it would be fun to have 5 blondes on stage, because there's usually 1. But I thought it would be fun to have 5 and see what happened. I'm going to write a gay movie. I think it's time for a good gay movie, like one that's actually good. I mean, Brokeback was amazing, but it was done by straight people. I thought it'd be really fun to have a good one where they get each other, and it's not sad. I think it might be kind of fun.
Happy ending.
Yeah, with a happy ending where the guy gets the guy. That'd be fun. You see what happened,
Would there be an Asian in it?
Hopefully. Hopefully. He might be Asian, why not? Did anyone see Bridesmaids? Yeah. I mean, it was amazing. I maybe changed the way the world will be. I really do think. I think it might have made a huge difference. So.
Is that true?
Yeah. No, I mean it was amazing. It's really kind of a. I loved when I took feminist film theory when I was at Brown,
And me and this other guy who was really quiet, and then a lot of women. And I was in my lesbian phase. I had a ponytail, and I wore an Angora sweater and overalls and Birkenstocks, right? And I did feminist film theory. And this is way back in early 90s, so there was no, they would talk about men a lot, and I was like, gay men don't do that. And there was no understanding that you're allowed not to do that. But one of the things I learned in there was that the politics actually is in the production, it's not in the story. It's who gets to be in it, who gets to, who is shown, who gets to direct it, who gets to light it, who gets to star in it, is the politics. We think it's the story always, but it actually is who gets to be there. And in this movie, it's 6 women.
Yeah, it's the filter through which the
Suddenly,
story's processed.
yeah, suddenly usually a movie would have 6 men and 1 woman, meaning that all women are the same. Suddenly in this movie, there's 6 women, they're all completely different, all rude, you know, and it's kind of great. So I think there's something different going on. Anyway.
I'd like to open the floor now to Q&A. Yes.
I have 2 questions, I guess. One to both of you. I don't know your work. I'm sorry to say, but at this point. But the first one specifically to you, Lynn. I was wondering. This is very quick and specific, and then the other one's a little bit more general and bigger. The photography. When I saw Ruined in New York, and it was the most cathartic experience I've ever had in a play, by far. And the photography that I think your husband may have taken of those women, Let Me Not Speak, at intermission, it was so powerful. It was exactly what I needed. But it's on tour now, and you don't have the photography, I don't think, because I saw it in Boston and it wasn't there. No. So I was wondering why not, and if that can change. But then the second question is generally, especially, you were saying about how getting out into the world was what you really wanted, being at Brown and then Yale. I guess to hear you both speak about what you did get from graduate school, with you again specifically, Intimate Apparel and Ruined, I feel like have this sucker punch component of it doesn't go the way you think, one negatively, one positively, and love that, it's the catharsis for me in Ruined. But I'm curious if that technique was something you got from graduate school, or what you guys did get from graduate school, besides the versatility you were saying of getting to produce, direct, write, act, not that, more on a technical writing level, what it did give you since you were sheltered by the academic.
Did everyone hear the question?
Just answer it.
It was a long question. To answer you specifically, why in Ruined, a play that I wrote, when you left the theater, on the wall you saw these incredible photographs of women which were taken right after they had told us a story. And they're very arresting. Their faces are sort of still sort of etched in their emotional masks. And the reason you didn't see it in the other productions is that those pictures were a representation of a journey that myself, Tony, and Kate Worski, the director, took together. And the subsequent productions were not. It was interpreted by a different director, and so it was not part of the entire concept. Though the photographs were present in Intiman, and I think that they're going to be in the program at Arena Stage, so you will see them. But to answer your question about graduate school, for me it's a very complicated response because I did not have a good experience. I was in New Haven during what was the crack years, and there was a lot of drug addiction, at least in the drama school, and also it was during the AIDS years, and so we were just trying to keep our friends alive, and so much of our experience was filtered through sadness, and the writing, I think, became second. And so when I left, and I think that in many ways that's why I retreated to Amnesty International, I felt as though I needed to do something tangible. I had to engage with the world because theater was not providing me with the emotional sustenance that I need because it was just fraught and difficult. So I feel like I have a completely anomalous experience, and I now teach it at Yale, and I feel that what I give the students what I didn't get, which is a mom and a nurturer, and because I don't think that playwriting can be taught. I think you come in with a talent, and it can be encouraged and nurtured, and you can allow the person the space to explore and develop. And I really think it's program dependent, and it's also more specifically than program dependent. I think it really depends on who's in your
Teacher.
class and who's teaching you.
Yeah,
And that, if you're looking for a program, those are the things that you have to look for.
yeah, and also if
Yeah.
it's free.
And it's free. Which Yale is free, and
Yeah,
Brown
Brown's
is
free.
free.
Yeah, makes a big difference because
Yeah.
you don't want a huge.
Debt.
Yeah.
Because you will not pay it off.
Yeah. But also the other thing, I mean, Paula was a teacher, she taught form rather than content. And so what I learned here was there's so many different ways of doing it. Which way do I want to do it? That's what made a huge difference being at graduate school. I found I studied and learned, you know, she made us go back to the futurists, to the surrealists, look at all the different kinds and to realize that basically you're making a play out of different pieces, devices. Which ones? Don't just automatically assume the way you should tell your story is the way you have in your head. And so that was a huge part. And then the people. It was the people and the teachers. Yeah.
All the way at the back.
I had a question for Adam. I was very disappointed that I didn't get to see We Have Always Lived in the Castle. So I was wondering if I'll ever get another chance.
I don't know. We got a horrible review from the Times. We did, and which was really too bad because usually musicals take more than one shot.
But can I say this? I've never gotten a good review in the Times, so it does
I
not
have.
mean you have.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I've
the
never,
hard part
so.
is to get someone else to want to do it if you get that. So, but we have had people who are interested, so we'll see. And I just actually, a couple of good musical theater stars said that they were interested, so who knows? Keep your fingers crossed.
Lowry?
Hi.
Larry Marshall, hi. I was hoping you'd be here. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
She's an amazing teacher. Oh my God, you guys have been so lucky to have her.
I just wanted to say, Lynn, how much I was blown away by Ruin. It was
Thank you.
just such a remarkable afternoon in the theater. And I was so thrilled, of course, to see my very own Quincy Bernstein
Brown alum?
knocking them dead up there. And I wonder if you guys could talk about your experience in working with other Brown students and alumni after you left Brown, and how that networking might or might not have been a part of your work.
Well, I can talk about the fact that your son played the shark in my play. So, no, yeah, it's really important. Actually, that's been a huge thing about having other brown people.
Well, I think that Brown, and I don't know whether this is true for Adam, but I know that there's a very close-knit Brown playwright circle, and somehow, I don't know whether it's because we have similar sensibilities or because we speak a similar language, we manage to find each other, and you feel as though you instantly have a bond because you have a shared experience. And I think almost more so than the acting relationship, for me, it's been the playwriting community that's been super, super important.
I've had both, actually, because I've used a lot of brown actors, and no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's a similar. It's interesting. There's I don't know.
But I will say, when an actor's auditioning and you look at the resume and you see Brown University, you smile a little. You know, you don't want them to see you smiling while you're auditioning, and it's like, oh, okay. You know, duly noted.
Yeah, I'm a playwriting student at Brown, and when I first got here, in my first workshop, we read in Apparel and Receptionist and a lot of these plays, and that was sort of part of a lot of the plays that were that moment where you go from high school not knowing that there's all these other forms for playwriting that exist, and everything sort of explodes. And I was wondering, what was that moment like for you? Who were the playwrights that you first read that sort of opened up the possibilities of what could be done?
I guess the first playwrights, because I grew up in New York City, and so I think my experience was slightly different because I grew up very much going to theater, so I had this very expansive theater experience before I even came to Brown University. And my foundation was the Negro Ensemble, and it was playwrights like Charles Fuller and his name just went out of my mind, and Alice Childress. It's African-American playwrights that came out of the Black Arts movement. And so the revelation for me when I came to Brown was that there were white people writing plays. I thought, oh, because I just thought theater is by and large, it's either musicals or it's written by black people. And those first plays that I was introduced to by Paula were like Mac Wellman, who really sort of explodes form, and he writes these kind of wonderful site-specific pieces, and Peter Barnes and Trevor Griffith, and what was very popular when we were here was sort of the angry British playwrights, and so that was the foundation. But I found myself much more drawn to the lyricism and the robust language of Tennessee Williams, and I felt as though I had to read him in secret, and go and really check the library out. It was like pornography, because everyone was reading these Stark Pinter plays, and I was reading Tennessee Williams.
I thought Lanford Wilson was the only writer. He was the one so beautiful. But then I loved Kreutz and the Germans, and actually went back into Shakespeare and Chekhov, and that's everybody. It was just the fact that there was everybody. It was what you're saying, and plus the ones that were happening right now that you just don't hear about, because there's a whole bunch of writing going on right now that people. I think there's actually a really beautiful sort of neo-realism going on right now. People trying to write non-dramatically and small.
The plays are very sort of
small
and
very
very
quiet
realistic,
and weird and sort of precise, almost minimalist right now. It's interesting. So.
Sweet. Yes?
Los Angeles, but I've noticed in the last 2 or 3 years since the economy crashed, the productions got smaller and smaller and smaller, and there's all these one-person shows. So I'm just wondering, and you said the politics are in the production, Adam, when you're writing now, are you thinking cast? I mean, is that a consideration in getting a play produced these days?
I think for a lot of the theaters, it's a consideration. I've heard it's like we're looking for 2 character plays, or we're looking for 3 character plays, but I certainly, when I sit down to write, don't take that into consideration, because I'd be too confined, and that's just not how I work. But that said, knowing that I'm going to write this very large cast, I have to come up with creative ways to get it produced, because I know that theaters aren't instantly going to say, we want to do this. And so after I write it, I have to then be a creative marketer and a creative producer before I even take it to the producer.
One of the things that I really care about is that each actor not something I think that's kind of hard about how we tell stories is that we make some people more important than others. I think part of the reason that George Bush was able to stay around for so long was that we made him important. We said his story was important. And I don't like making, if I'm going to write, I want to have every actor have a decent part. I don't like, so I actually end up with smaller casts just in general, because I want each person to, so 6 or 7. You can't, once you get bigger, then suddenly someone's standing there for a long time, and they're not. It's hard to tell their story, so that's what happens for me often.
Over there?
How much control do you have over a play after you've written it? I went to see Ruined, and the male characters were all played by the same actors. Like they're all the same. And whether it was because you couldn't afford more actors, or because my interpretation was, as far as the women were concerned, the men were all the same. Whether he's a soldier, or if he's a rebel, or he's whatever, they're all the same. They're all the Johns. Who cares who they are? And that was my take on it. And I wanted to know how much of that was your interpretation, or how much was the director or the producer, or how much input do you get once you've written a play?
Well, once you've written a play, particularly for the first production, that we're there nurturing it, because the play really isn't finished until first encounter with an audience, and so it's still being written. So I'm sort of nurturing it through to the end. But the answer to your question is that it's both. Is that if we cast that play with every single male that spoke, it would be 20 characters. And I knew that no theater would produce it, but I specifically felt as though the characters that were really important were the women. And no one would really notice that the men are a double cast. And if we did it sort of fluidly, but it's the politics of the piece. It's saying that these men, regardless of whether they are rebels or government soldiers, are the same person, and the impact that they're having on the women is the same. And so it was a choice that we had to make because of economics, but it also ended up being a storytelling choice as well.
Up there?
Having gotten bad reviews in the time, I'm just wondering, what do you think in general about theater critics? Do you think that they serve an important role, or should there be maybe like a Zagat guide to and have the audience decide?
I don't know. I mean, I find it weird that it's someone's career to criticize other people's work. That's just me. I don't understand who that human being is. I think it's interesting to have someone who interprets the work, but I find that so often that that's not the case with critics. They really are given this little modicum of power, and at times they can wield it incredibly cruelly. You know, you take Ben Brantley, for instance, at the New York Times. He knows that he has the power to close a show. And I just very recently got a review from him in which the top of the review is all quite ugly and negative, and then at the very end he said, but it's really funny and I enjoyed it. And I thought, why couldn't you put that at the top? But I felt as though he was saying, I really am not invested in seeing this play have a life, and I can go on and on about the lack of female critics, the lack of African American critics. I don't really feel as though the critical mass is really representative of the American voice, and so my frustration is that I am being judged and interpreted for the world, by and large, through a white male filter, and that really, really bothers me. And if it were sort of more egalitarian and we had many more critics, I might not be as upset as I am by the critics that exist out there. I don't know how you feel, but this, this is a hot button topic for Playwrights, so we can do an entire.
Over there?
I was interested in what you were both saying about other influencers. I was a theater major here too, and then when I went to an MFA program in playwriting, I sometimes found the best training not from the writing classes, but from acting, from art, from psychology. And I guess Lynn, specific to you, but also to Adam, do you encourage your students, just to sort of branch out in broader to get the other influences rather than just sit in the writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, I feel like the classes that influenced me most, and in many ways almost more so, were more important than my playwriting classes, were my religious studies classes, where I learned about mythology and sort of the ancient tradition of storytelling and the way in which myth can shape our understanding of the world. I took a lot of music classes. I didn't take art, but I think it's essential. You know, one of my frustrations with the graduate programs is that they're shaped almost entirely around the act of writing, and students aren't encouraged to branch out and take courses in the other departments.
I try and get all of them to take business classes. No, because it's show business. You know, it's like literally I want people to learn, okay, how do you work in business? How do you market? How do you get people to do your work? So there's the other half of that. We have to know arts. We have to know all the arts, but that's, I think, the other thing. But
I mean, Adam's right. It's sadly, 50% of what we do is business, and you agree with this. I mean, people think you're just sort of sitting home writing, but 50% of what you have to do is promote yourself and nurture your career. Talking to people. And
We'll have final 2 questions. Sam?
This is just a comment. I wanted to thank you. You talked about the playwright's responsibilities, and you both create new opportunities for actors, for all kinds of actors. And as an actor, I really appreciate that because you're guaranteeing that everyone's voice has a chance to be heard, everyone gets a chance to do this kind of work. So thank you for taking that charge seriously.
You're welcome. I mean, I think it's like, there's such a difference. I've had so many plays done where I'll have a gay couple and one will be straight and one will be gay, and I'm like, give me two gay guys so they can kiss each other. I remember I had a straight guy playing in a play once, and he had to say, oh, I was sitting in class and Marie was in front of me and Toby was behind me. I was like, no. It's Marie was in front of me and Toby was behind me. You know, it just makes a huge difference, but he didn't know because he was straight. So he was like, the girl was looking at, no, come on. And it's yeah.
We have a final question.
Most of your experience seems to be in urban coastal. What about regional theater? Because I'm very much involved with my little state of Vermont.
Love them.
Where you've been and what
I was thrilled I had a gay play done in Utah. You know? It was great. I went to Salt Lake City and saw it, and it was just thrilling. And then that play's been done in Montana. It's been done in Idaho. And I was like, really? You know, they're doing this, and it feels. And I'll get people. They'll write me and tell me, oh, I saw this play here, and it was great because our theater does it, and it's all over the place. I mean, theater, it's like that everywhere. There's these little pockets, and
The regional theaters are bread and butter. It's where most of our plays are developed. You know, I've spent 6 weeks in Buffalo, in San Antonio, never here, but all over. I mean, it's really where we create a lot of our work and test it out, is in regional theaters.
yeah.
What a wide-ranging conversation. Well, Join us, thank you.